There we go. Well, great. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're gonna go ahead and get started. I see there's some folks coming in. So this is our second workshop series. So the title of this series is The Conversation. I know there were a few questions last week about how to have the conversation with your students regarding tobacco and vaping. So Joanna Ramirez, who's with us today from Health Education Council, she's going to be presenting and sharing this information with you all. But before we get started, I just want to give you a little information about who we are in Twin Rivers. So like I said, my name is Jeremy Combs. I'm a program development specialist for student services. We also have Scott Kaiser, who's a program specialist as well as student services. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, we're with the Tobacco Use Prevention Education Program. So this is a proposition, basically through Prop 56 and 99, they allocate funds for these programs. And we're happy to be able to provide another layer of service with family and community engagement this year. So we're excited to be able to partner with Health Education Council to provide this information to our families. So just a quick overview of some of the services that we do offer in our district. So the prevention curriculum that we offer is through 6th through 12th grade. We also have youth development programs, peer outreach programs, Club Live and Friday Night Live, which we partner with the Sacramento County Office of Education to provide. In addition to that, we provide intervention services to students and cessation services. So students that are wanting to quit, there's resources that we use, which I believe we'll be sharing some of those resources at the end of our presentation today. And then, like I said, the new layer of what we're adding is the family and community engagement piece, which is why we're doing this workshop series, and we're excited to have you all today. So before we go into the presentation, I just wanted to talk to everyone a little bit about what the weeks are going to look like. So we're in week 2. And as I mentioned, today's topic of discussion will be the conversation. Every session that we do, every training will be held on Thursdays for the next 2 Thursdays from 3 to 4. So same time, same place. And week 3, we're going to be exploring advocating for healthier environments and just looking at how you can be a leader in your community and looking at what you can do to get involved. And then really week 4 is going to be focused on having that group discussion. I know there's a lot of questions that have been asked throughout the presentation. And just note that your question wasn't answered in the first session. We are noting that information because the idea is some of the poll questions that you'll be answering and the information that you provide to us, we'll be using that to inform our families on some of the areas that they want some more information on. So that will be happening in week 4. So it will be the same link every week. And as you all know, especially those who attended last week, at the end of the session, we will be doing a raffle for a $25 Starbucks gift card. We're actually having 5 winners from this session. If you won last week, unfortunately, you can't win again this week. However, you're still eligible for our grand prize gift basket, which more details will be coming on that. That's going to be provided through Health Education Council. So like I said, you have to remain on the whole time. So at the end of the session, after we do our Q&A, we're going to announce our 5 winners. And then those 5 folks, if you could just stay on afterwards so we can get your information and make sure we have the correct emails, because those cards are going to be sent electronically. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and get to our presentation today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Joanna Ramirez with Health Education Council.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our second workshop. So for today, we're going to be talking about, so it's the conversation. So we'll be identifying e-cigarette use in youth and how to go about starting that discussion with them. So next slide, thank you. So for our work, so we're the Health Education Council. I'm with the Health Education Council, and we're a nonprofit whose mission is to cultivate health and well-being in underserved communities by leveraging the power of collaboration. And our programs meet community identified needs and are designed to address underlying drivers of health. And this program is Lucha Tabaco, which stands for Latinos Unidos contra el Hábito y Adicción al Tabaco, which is Latinos United Against the Habit and Addiction to Tobacco. In our program, we offer workshops, trainings, assistance for school staff, clinic staff, health professionals, and for other parent and community groups. And for today's presentation, we're going to be going over e-cigarettes. What are they? What is the attraction? What are the health effects, the signs and symptoms of use, and starting a conversation with young people. So the types of e-cigarettes, and many of you have joined us from the last session, and if you're new, we did just go over e-cigarettes briefly. And like we mentioned, there are many different types of e-cigarettes that are out there in the market for teens to use, and they are becoming a lot smaller and easier to hide. And e-cigarettes come in many shapes and sizes. Most have a battery, a heating element, and a place to hold a liquid. And some e-cigarettes are made to look like regular cigarettes or cigars or pipes, and then some resemble pens or USB sticks and other everyday items. And e-cigarettes, a lot aside from delivering, nicotine, they can also deliver marijuana and other drugs. So in this image, you can see some examples of the different kinds of e-cigarettes. So there's like the closed systems, which are more pod-based. And then we have the disposables, the ones that, you could throw out. And then there's a refillable open systems, which kind of look like a little tank. And then some other different kinds of vape pens. And then some of these are rechargeable and reusable. Okay, so we have our first poll question. It should be coming up on your screen. So it's how many e-cigarette flavors are there? Okay, I think we have like almost 80% voted, so I'll end it now. Okay, there we go. Okay, so most answered, it was pretty split between almost all of the answers. Um, so the answer is there's actually more than 15,000 flavors out there. So that's a lot of different, e-cigarette flavors, and we'll be going over the different flavors. Okay, so hooking youth with flavors. So what is the attraction to e-cigarettes for our youth? So the tobacco companies, they know that flavors attract youth, and they exploit this by selling over, like we mentioned, 15,000 types of flavors for e-cigarettes. And over 80% of tobacco users, they start using before the age of 18. And this is due to many reasons, which we'll go over on later today in the presentation. And over half have started with menthol cigarettes, since this is one of the most popular and common flavors that the e-cigarettes are sold in. And youth cite the flavors as the top reason for using e-cigarettes. And so for the SB 793, that is a flavored tobacco ban. And that is a California bill that bans the sale of menthol cigarettes and all flavored e-cigarettes statewide, as well as flavored non-cigarette tobacco products, such as smokeless tobacco and some cigars. And unfortunately, it does contain some exemptions for hookah, pipe tobacco, and premium cigars. This was actually voted on last year, but it hasn't gone into effect yet, but it's progress. Okay, and advertising to teens. So social media, it really helps to fuel the popularity of e-cigarettes, and tobacco and e-cigarette companies. They've capitalized on social media use by having influencers, post using the different types of e-cigarettes. So it'll attract the teens to start using them. And e-cigarette manufacturers, they used to in the past, the way that they marketed, they switch their marketing from adults to youth when it comes to e-cigarettes. And some of these tactics, they've been prohibited for tobacco companies because they specifically are targeting children and youth. And so e-cigarettes are marketed in a wide variety of channels, and they all reach a broad amount of youth and young adults. And like we've seen, these advertising efforts have been pretty effective because the use of e-cigarettes in youth has increased in the past years. Okay, and our next poll question. So this is, what are some signs of a nicotine addiction? And I think for this one, it should be multiple choice. Okay, I think we can end it now. Okay, so you all voted on most of all of them, and the one that got the most was mood swings. So that one is definitely, so the answer was all of the above. That is one of the signs of addiction, of nicotine addiction, and we'll go over some of them um, coming up right now. So some of the psychological signals would be like anxiety, mood swings, anger, depression, and then some examples of physical signals would be changes in their sleeping habits, changes in their eating habits, them having either, weight loss or weight gain. Next slide. Okay, and the health effects on our youth. So e-cigarettes are made up of over 60 chemical compounds, and one of the most harmful is nicotine. And we know that nicotine can harm the developing brain, and it can affect their attention and their learning abilities, their mood, and their impulse control. And the use of nicotine in adolescence may increase risk for future addiction to other drugs. And like you all answered in the poll question, some of the more common signs of nicotine addiction are them being more anxious and more irritable, having trouble sleeping and focusing in school or other tasks. And some other signs that you can find in their environment, like in their room, would be eye droppers that they regularly use to cover up the redness from the effect of using vaping, and different multiple chargers, since a lot of these devices need to be charged for them to be able to use them. And the unintended consequences of using e-cigarettes. So the e-cigarette, the aerosol that the users breathe from the device and the breathe and exhale, it can contain harmful and other harmful substances like carcinogenic heavy metals, ultrafine particles that can be inhaled deep into their lungs, and nicotine. And e-cigarettes can also cause unintended injuries, like having some of them, they explode because they overheat, and that's happened when they're being charged. Next slide. The vaping epidemic. So in the United States, the youth are more likely than adults to use e-cigarettes. And we know this because e-cigarettes are mostly flavored, and that's what's appealing to the youth. And in California, there's been 204 vaping-related cases and 4 deaths. And these cases are mostly male, and the age ranges from 14 to 70. And most have required 20% have required an electric respirator, so they need an assisted breathing device because it affects their lungs. And in 2020, 3.6 million US middle and high school students used e-cigarettes in the past 30 days. So this is actually a decrease from 2019. So it shows progress. Okay, and our last poll question. So what are some harmful consequences related to e-cigarettes? Okay, we could go ahead and end it. Okay, so for this one, it was also all of the above, and most of you were pretty even with the lung damage and nicotine addiction. And like we know, vaping, it increases nicotine into the body, and nicotine is highly effective. So like we mentioned, it slows the brain development and increases the risk of other types of addiction later in their lives. And it also, irritates their lungs and causes other types of serious lung damage.
And so before getting into the conversations, we felt as a district, and then also what myself and Jeremy see in our district when we work with youth, we feel and we find that a lot of the reasons why students use or youth begin to use is anxiety, is stress, boredom, curiosity, peer pressure, modeling parents' behavior or other adults' behavior that they're very accustomed to, or they interact with a lot, and grown up, and then they think they're going to feel cool if they do it. So when we provide intervention, working with youth one-on-one or in groups, a lot of the students are saying these are the main reasons why they're using. And so it's good for us to understand why they would start using in the first place, to identify and to prevent in the future. So prevention wise, what I always talk to parents about is make sure that you're always communicating with them. And that's going to be a form of the conversation starter that Joanna's going to be talking about. But being involved in your children's life, obviously it's important, but knowing who they're involved with, what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, is very important. Getting them involved in activities and sports would decrease the level of boredom and curiosity. They'll be active, they'll be healthier, they'll not want to do X, Y, and Z. Being involved in their lives, obviously that's important. Setting rules and enforcing them. So making sure that in my house, we will not be doing this or that. Making sure that in this house, we will not be doing drugs, alcohol, tobacco, because these are the consequences, right? So it's kind of getting into that conversation starter. Giving responsibilities to your children, that always helps them out. Offer incentives to remain sober. My parents offered me incentives. Hey, if you remain sober throughout high school and college, this is what you'll get. So I try to stay true to that. Positive role models, obviously in the household and people around. It's a safer home environment. It's going to be more conducive to their learning and growth. Helping your children choose their friends wisely. So once again, being involved, knowing who your children are hanging out with, knowing if there's anything at school where your children might say that this person has a tendency to bring alcohol, tobacco, or drugs to school, possibly doing an anonymous tip to a principal or an administrator, us saying, hey, this is not a very friendly environment for my child to be in right now. This child's bringing stuff to school. Please let us know so we can alert the administrators to keep all of our children healthy and clean. And then lastly, talk about alcohol, tobacco, and drugs. And that's kind of where Joanna's going to be talking about the conversation starter, when to start talking with your children about it. I always feel I've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I've already talked to my 8-year-old about it, about alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, the harm and effects. So I feel that the earlier the better, because like Joanna's saying in her presentation, that social media, children are on social media are seeing so many different things related to tobacco, related to vaping, related to alcohol, relating to drugs and marijuana. And so these things become like they are cool to do because people on social media are doing them. People are hired as advertisers to go on there and share what they're doing and why. So it's best to know what your children are also doing on social media, because they're exposed to so many different things. And with that being said, I want to hand it back to Joanna to talk about the conversation.
Thank you, Scott. We could go to the next slide. Okay, so here's some basic conversation starters, and we'll go more in depth on more tips and like a scenario for you guys in the presentation. So these are just a few that you can ask your kids, like do you smoke, vape, or use tobacco? And these questions, they can be asked when you guys are passing by like a tobacco retailer or you see a commercial or an ad for tobacco or smoking. You could also ask them, do any of your friends smoke or vape? What would you do if they offered you a cigarette? And you can reduce your child's risk by helping him or her be ready to say no. And the important thing is to help your kids be prepared to resist the peer pressure to using tobacco. Another one you could ask them is, tell me what you heard about smoking and health, and how long do you think you have to smoke for it to affect your health. And this will help you understand what they know and what you have left to educate them on. So for the conversation, you could like this is like kind of like a framework for you to follow if you're having some trouble or don't know how to go about it. Just asking them, um, your ask your child what they know about smoking and health, and help them fill in the gaps with any knowledge that you have and that you find. You can also tell them some of the tobacco industry's marketing myths. And you can also remind them that all tobacco products, even the smokeless ones, they contain nicotine and they can cause addiction. You can also share some resources for them to do their own research. There's a lot of different resources out there specifically for teens for them to, do their own research. If having that conversation is difficult for them or you're having trouble, and it's just easier for them to, look at it themselves. You could also explain how it's much easier to say no in the first place than to quit later. And so this will be our scenario example of having a conversation. So it's an example of how to have the conversation with your kids through a sequence of storytelling using pictures and guided dialogue. And we'll be sharing this fotonovela with you guys afterwards. Oh, if you want to go back, it's going to keep going. Okay, so starting, you want to choose the right place and time. By choosing where you both feel comfortable, you'll both be more inclined to open up. You also want to be sure you don't react, so just listen to them. And I know that can be hard, especially, you don't want to be confrontational. You just want to make sure that they know that you're there to listen to them and not judge them. Um, okay, you click next. Okay. And then you want to ask what they think about vaping, and if they know what is in jewel pods and other vapes. So you can see in the images, and we'll be sharing this with you guys. These are just like a dialogue scenario that you guys can be having, or different questions to make it easier for you guys to have that conversation. Okay. Okay, and you want to let them know that vape pods contain harmful ingredients. And all this, it could cause, the irreversible lung damage, and that it's not just water vapor, and that it's not safe. Okay, and then you also want to then talk about how you have been reading about how vaping can be dangerous for their health, and let them know why that matters. So in this conversation, the dad is saying, I read that vaping can harm brain development. Um, and his son is answering back, does everybody know this? And then he's explaining, and one jewel pod contains as much nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. So he's letting him know more information about it. Okay, and then you can explain that once you start vaping, nicotine addiction follows, and quitting is really hard. So in the conversation, he's bringing up things that he's seen on the news. So these are also good examples to start that conversation. Okay, and if you're a smoker or a former smoker, you may want to share your own experience with addiction. And if you haven't smoked, you could also let them know, or if you are not a smoker, you can let them know of any family members or friends that you know of, um, and their experiences. And when talking about vaping with your kids, remember that once is not enough, especially with youth. You want to make this an ongoing conversation, especially also if it's an issue with your children and you want them to stop and help them. Okay, and when you first bring up the subject, your kid might be caught off guard and reluctant to engage. But once you open that door to the topic, they'll be more inclined to talk to you about it later. So you just want to bring it up, in a calm manner. You don't want to be reactive. You want to let them know that, they can come to you and talk to you about anything and that you're not judging them. That way you guys can keep that conversation going. Okay, next. And we'll be sharing some more links with you guys about how to have that conversation. Next slide. Okay. And so these are some resources we'll be sharing with you. And one of these, that PDF document, is a like step-by-step conversation with tips for you to have with your kids. So it'll go more in depth of having specific like questions and conversation starters for you guys to use.
And also in here, there are a few resources that if you have identified your child or children as smokers or being involved in other substances, they can utilize these resources as well. There are quit lines. And the last one that we put on there is called Care Solace, and that is a mental health. So obviously, knowing what's going on with the pandemic, mental health is on the rise. And so if your children are experiencing mental health and they need support with coping strategies, if they're depressed, if they have anger that is kind of stemmed from it, it's because of lack of connectivity with school and friends and all that. We can help them out through counseling. We have counseling services, and we can use Care Solace to support you and your family with that. So, and that's all the way from substance abuse to tobacco use to alcohol abuse, all the way down to mental health. Thanks, Joanna.
Okay, and so for this one, we'll just have you guys answer in the chat of what section did you guys find the most helpful, so we can gauge, what you guys enjoyed. Um, and we'll be sharing those resources with you guys as well, since I know those will be very helpful. Okay, and as you guys are sharing your answers on the chat, we can go to the next slide, and that should conclude our presentation. So thank you guys. Here's my contact information if you guys want to reach out to me and my program. We can share some more resources for you guys. So thank you.
And then as well, for our district contacts, if you are in need of help for, like I said before, mental health services, intervention, you guys can refer your children over to us. So that is our contact. You can contact us via our phone lines, our office lines, or email us if you'd like. But we are, we're district officials, so we are always about helping our youth. If I know there's some students here watching as well. If you or your friends have any need for, if you feel that maybe your friend has a very tough upbringing or environment that they're exposed to and they need some service or need some help with alcohol, tobacco, or drugs, they can reach out to us as well. And we can provide intervention and provide them with resources too, that if they need more in-depth help, we can link them up with better services as well. And with that being said, before we get to the raffle prizes, we kind of wanted to open up. I know there's been some questions in the chat box. I don't know, Edberto, did you have any questions that you wanted to bring forth?
Right now, I would say just recommend. There isn't any questions in particular that I have.
Okay, and then we'll open this up to the group if there's any questions about this presentation regarding the conversation.
Yes, I have one question.
Okay, go for it.
Yes, can it's possible to send us by email all the information, where I need the information for my kids? So can you send us everything on email, please?
Absolutely, yes, we absolutely will. We were going to, at the conclusion of the fourth session, we were going to send out everything with all the resources within all the presentations. So that way you guys aren't missing anything and it comes together with everyone who's been attending these programs. If for some reason you need it now, we can send it out, but if not, then we'll send it out the very last session, which is 2 Thursdays from now.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, with that being said, Joanna, thank you so much for your presentation on that. We're going to get into the raffle prizes, which I'm sure you guys are all anxiously waiting for as well. Hopefully that information was good for you guys, and hopefully that helps you out within your children now or in the very near future or in the future, and hopefully it doesn't have to get there.
Before we get there was one question that was asked as far as when it comes to banning vaping, tobacco, marijuana products from teens. One of the persons asking, why can't they?
And so, Joanna, did you want to touch more on SB 793?
Yeah, that was my question, because like that's like I kind of feel like how like kids are like really kind of like they're trying to get themselves like connected to the marijuana, vape, and tobacco and stuff, but it's kind of bad for them because like they don't know what it can do to them and like what can affect them and stuff like that. Like if they want to go to college, and they might mess up, or they may like do something to like something that will like not help them get like a good job or anything, because that will really mess you up. Like they don't understand. Like if they try to offer their friend a vape, they need to say no. Like they'll say no, I'm fine, I'm good. But adults need to like tell them that they're not like age required. Like they don't need vape and marijuana and stuff like that. It's not for them though. It's for like people that are like older, not for people that are like 18 or like 17, 16 or like 15. They like if they have like depression, anxiety, they need to talk to their families about it. They don't need to just go, oh, I need vape, I need something that can like control my like anxiety or depression, because that's not what that's for. That's what families are for. That's what families are there for them to talk about. Like they're supposed to be like telling them like how they feel and stuff like that. That's what like activities are for, like doing paintings or listening to music, video gaming, something like that. That's more for them to do instead of just saying, oh, I need marijuana, or I need tobacco, oh, I need vape. That's not good for them.
That's 100% accurate. I agree with that. And fortunately, some students may not have the resources as far as families that are there. Some students are raised by their grandparents or in foster homes. So sometimes we definitely agree with you, but sometimes that upbringing might not be there. And so that's why it's very, very important. And we totally agree with you that in this upbringing, our families are most important. And then after that, you know, your peers and who you hang out with and choosing the right friends, but making sure that you're not put in the wrong situation or a wrong group of friends that will get you going in the wrong direction. And you are correct. 21 and over is the legal age for alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. So, and the reason why they do it at 21 is because our brain is still developing, like Joanna said in the presentation. Our brains stop developing between the ages of 21 and 25, depending on individuals. And so that's why it's very important that youth do not get involved in this at an early age, because typically they become addicted at an early age. And that's why, just like Joanna said, big tobacco or other companies, marijuana, alcohol, they get you hooked at an early age, and then you become sometimes lifelong learner or lifelong addicts. So one of the other questions was, how come they can't ban some of those things like marijuana and vaping? And so as of right now, marijuana was passed and legalized in California to be 21 and over. So that won't be banned unless a lot of bad things come about with a lot of youth using. They did, like Joanna said, with SB 793, they're trying to ban flavored flavorings, flavored tobacco, or menthol cigarettes, menthol. And the reason is because it is, they're trying to target youth to have them be lifelong addicts or the addiction to keep going to where they're filling their pockets as far as money. They started at 13 and 15 years old and they're lifelong users. They're going to be benefiting and they're only going to be filling their pockets with money. And so that's why we're trying to, the SB 793 that went through the Senate, it was a bill that it passed, or it didn't pass because they had enough signers that or signees that overturned it where it was going to go back into legislation. So unfortunately, and just to give you guys an update, this is how big tobacco does it. They during that bill when it was passing or when it's about to pass, big tobacco had people going out to vendors, Target, Walmart, and had people petition or sign the petition to overturn it to where it wouldn't ban. And so you get $5 per signature, whatever the case is. And people were out in front of the stores saying, sign this petition. It will save our youth from danger, from tobacco, from X, Y, and Z. And it was actually the opposite. So people were signing for that bill to be overturned, which would still allow vaping to be sold, or like flavored tobacco to be sold, which is still targeting our youth. So there's just so many things. Big tobacco has a lot of money, and unfortunately, we're all here to try and keep our youth clean, and I believe, like Nevaeh said, try and get them to college and trying to get them in the right path. But there's so many things that can take away from that path, as far as advertising, marketing. Friends that might be in the wrong the nature for your children. So we just all have to be very vigilant and diligent as far as how we would raise our youth and be involved. And thank you guys for those questions and comments. Anybody else?
The other question I see is, as far as how do you start a conversation, at what age is it appropriate to start talking about certain, as far as tobacco, alcohol, controlled substances, at what age is appropriate? I see that there's already some mentions within the chat that they started early, even themselves had started early at an age, as far as having these conversations.
Perfect. Joanna, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So, like how Scott had mentioned, he's talked to his kids already. I think, this definitely does depend on you when you think it's okay, but the sooner the better, because the youth are starting to use e-cigarettes and tobacco at a younger age. it seems like it's, getting younger and younger. So the sooner that you think is appropriate to have that conversation with them, the better. And just, providing them, depending on the age, just providing them, different levels of information to them, and having, different levels of conversation with them. Like we mentioned in one of the pictures of the fotonovela, if you guys see like a commercial or you're walking by a store, just find a way to mention it to them, no matter, even if they're young, you know they're very receptive to that, and they see everything that's going on. So you may think that they're too young, but they're not. Children are very smart, and especially now with social media and them having them access to that, it can come from anywhere, and you want to make sure you're on top of it. So whenever you feel that age is appropriate, then the sooner the better.
Great job, Joanna. And kind of to piggyback what Joanna said about my youth, my children. So my dad has been a lifelong smoker since the age of 13, and so my children saw my dad smoking. That's their grandpa, and they love him, and they see him smoking, and that's how impactful it is that if they see somebody at a young age smoking, they feel like it's okay, or drinking or using marijuana, whatever the case is. It just goes to show you they want to model that behavior because they think it's okay. If they're doing it, it must be okay and not and healthy. So that's why I started at a young age, because my son at 4 said that when he gets older, he'll start smoking. And I know he saw that from my grandpa, or from my dad, his grandpa. But that's when I started. I started early at 4 and showed you this is exactly why you shouldn't. Well, why does grandpa smoke? So it's like Joanna said, when those conversations start, they open or they call out, just think about those times, be mindful of those times to then open up about it and then start discussing about it. And if you see things out and about, commercials anti, against tobacco, this is your brain on drugs, kind of those commercials we all saw growing up, those things, have your children listen to them. And so I think that will help in the long run. Like Joanna said, students are starting this stuff way earlier. It typically was 12 to 14. It's earlier than that, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. So it's good that we're aware of that and we start the conversation earlier, like Joanna said. All right. With that being said, thank you guys so much for attending and staying with us. Great questions. Jeremy, would you like to start the prizes?
Thank you. I was just finishing up everything because we finished a little bit early today. So I was able to go through and get our attendees. So the way we do it is we have a number randomizer. So towards the end of the presentation, we just select numbers based on how participants are listed there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to announce the 5 people that would need to just kind of stay behind for a second so I can explain how the gift cards work. So Roberto, at this point too, if unless we have any other questions, we can probably go ahead and stop the recording piece too. But with that being said, we'll go ahead and get to the 5 names. So
and the drum roll.
And the drum roll, that's right.